Be here now. Just be here now.
Welcome to the Be Here Now guest podcast. This series features a collection of teachings and conversations centered around mindfulness, spiritual growth, and living a life in balance. Each week, our diverse network of guest teachers and hosts offer up wisdom and practices from a different spiritual path and perspective. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit BeHereNowNetwork.com/donate.
So it's certainly been quite a journey, the whole parenting adventure. And people who have further along in the parenting adventure tell me it never ends. So I'm still, trying to understand it. And it seems like it's always something new to understand and new to figure out. And it certainly was when I did about 10 years of Buddhist monastic practice fairly intensely before I had kids. And so that was, in some ways it was nice and prepared the ground for practicing as a parent, which turned out to be much more challenging for me than being a monastic. And challenging, because of my particular disposition or something, monastic life was pretty wonderful. And family life brought much more to the surface in my mind, my heart, of my attachments and my expectations and ways in which I lived that were not that needed to be looked at and examined. So I'm very grateful for the practice of being a parent. I feel like I'm a much better person going through it, and I hope that journey and path of being a parent continues to bring out, I don't know, be careful how I say it. I hope that it continues to show me the worst in me, but bring out the best. And show me what's difficult because I want to face it and deal with it. When I was ordained I was ordained for a while as a Zen monk, and I didn't have much relationship to ritual before that ceremony, and I just thought, it was just a ceremony, and I didn't really think much about it. I knew I wanted to be a monk. And so I went through this ritual, somewhat elaborate ritual, shaving heads and putting on robes. And after the ritual, it was a rite of passage for me. And now I was much more of a public person, because if you dress in monastic robes and have a shaved head, you're a public person. I mean, people recognize you for what you are, and you stand out. And it was kind of dramatic for me because if I was out in the public before I was ordained, if I was noticed, people mostly moved away, or they didn't notice me at all. But once I was ordained, it was a beautiful thing because you become kind of. I think people just assume that you belong to everyone, and all these people who normally would never have talked to me came up and found me, and sitting on the bus stop waiting for the bus, and people would sit down next to me and unload their life and share with me. It was quite something. So instead of being a public person, for what you're about, what your intention is, kind of public. And so but the consequences of that was that the whole ordination thing and being public and all that, I became much more sensitive to my shortcomings than I had before. And my shortcomings that I had stood out and highlight much stronger. And you would think that maybe that's painful or difficult to see your shortcomings more than you would normally. But because of the ordination, now I understood myself metaphorically to be a child of the Buddha. And because I was a child of the Buddha, it was more okay to have shortcomings. And I love this combination of seeing them more clearly and being more relaxed and open and accepting of myself, compassionate for having them. It wasn't so I could merely go along having shortcomings and acting in the world that way, but I was motivated to practice with it and work with it and refine myself and develop myself so those shortcomings are no longer there, shortcomings. But there was this wonderful combination of seeing my shortcomings more clearly and having the generosity of spirit to hold it all in a kind way towards myself, which I just found so precious and helpful as I went along. And so then I became a parent, and turned out I had more shortcomings. And so what I had learned about holding it in a generous, open way and being, okay in a certain way, to realize this is material I have to work with, and not to make it more difficult than it had to be, was very helpful for me as a parent. And there was a lot of surprises for me in being a parent, and one of them, maybe I'm pretty naive in many ways and didn't know a lot about certain parts of the world, and so this idea of being parenting, learning the connection to a parent to a child was kind of a discovery for me, and I was surprised at how strong the bond was. I should have known. I guess maybe I did intellectually, but to really experience it and to feel the strong connectivity and the kind of intuitive lines of communication, intuitive lines of caring and concern and mutuality was a great thing. It was quite something to see. And I got, and it comes along with a sense of responsibility to, now I have to care for this person, and then figure out what those lines of responsibilities are when we step forward to offer care and support, and when we step back and don't offer it. And it seems like that generally kind of changes all the time as they grow up. And because at some point I wasn't cleaning their bottoms anymore, but they could do it for themselves. I wasn't feeding them anymore, and they could do it themselves. And all these things, right? They started doing more and more. And at some point, they left the house alone. What? Down the street they went, and at some point they got in the car and left. And so where is the independence and where is the responsibility? It's constantly shifting. So I found it a constant kind of reflection to consider, to think about, to figure out where's the line between my responsibility and not my responsibility, and when to offer them the independence, when to recognize their interdependence and continue with that, when to recognize my responsibility, and to dance. It's a constant puzzle to figure out. A precious moment for me personally was when my older son was, maybe he was about 5, and he came out of the bathroom. He spent some time in there, and he came out of his bathroom and dressed and his hair combed in a way that I'd never seen before on him. I'd never seen him so, concerned with how he is. And I don't know where he got this idea, where he dreamt up how to dress this way, but in my mind, he was dressed like a 1970s disco king. And I didn't know where he got those pants and those shirts and the gold necklace, and the hair was kind of, up, and it was quite remarkable. And having been during the 70s a hippie, and a monk, and this was not my idea of what my kid was going to grow up to become. So I could feel inside this thought, oh no, it's downhill from here. This is like, this shouldn't be, Those thoughts went through my mind. And at the same time, I thought, well, who am I to say who this person is supposed to become? And he's found himself this, and I'm not in charge of kind of shaping him in terms of this kind of personality, this kind of way of being in the world. And it's a mystery to me who he's supposed to become, who he's supposed to individuate and actualize actually who he is. And it just said, this is a time to give him his freedom, his independence, allow it to be, not shape him in my image, but to recognize him, he's going to have his own image, his own way of being. And it may be pretty innocuous, 5-year-old dressed up as a particular way that, I think it just lasted for probably 10 minutes, the whole thing. So, but what it went through my mind was kind of very instructive and a little bit both challenging and inspiring. This idea of being careful to allow each person to kind of become who they're supposed to become or who they can become or something. And how do we do that in a way that supports them and is right for them? And then part of the challenge for me was that also is watching especially my older one grow up. I think maybe I was all fresh then. Was how much it reawoke the sufferings that I had as a child. How it was for me to go to school and be ostracized. How it was for me to kind of move to a new country and not be included and have friends who were kind of mean or difficult or uncaring or all kinds of things came up, and so I guess I realized, raising a kid, that actually they hadn't completely 100% resolved these kinds of childhood challenges that I had, because I started seeing the world or seeing my son through those eyes, and I started worrying that he was going to have the same experiences because I was kind of biased to see that as being the problems. And then learning to see, I have to be careful with this. This is my issue. And it's not my son's issue. And so I have to be very careful here to not kind of over-parent and maybe, become a self-fulfilling prophecy by kind of trying to kind of over-care make sure those things don't happen to my child. And in doing that, create a kind of awkward or difficult situation where he gets shaped by my past and my difficulties, but also my own difficulties in the past also help with the empathy and care. So how does my empathy, when is it clean? When is it appropriate? When do I still seeing through the filter inappropriately of my own background, where it doesn't help to see it that way? And the point is to kind of step out of the way and really try to see the child as the child is, not my imagination of what might be happening. So this constant process of reflection, constant process of mindfulness, of paying attention, what's going on here, what's happening with me, and I feel so grateful to the mindfulness practice that I've learned that it's kind of second nature to keep looking at a thought when it arises and question it and say, just a thought, as opposed to have a thought arise, not to know it's arising, and then that thought becomes the truth. I see someone, I see my son, I see the people around me, and I have an idea, a bias, an assumption, an expectation, and if I don't see those things arise, then it's too easy to kind of it's just an invisible filter that I operate with. But because of the mindfulness practice, it's kind of like become a fairly common habit or practice to notice the arising of a thought, to notice the arising of an emotion, and to question it, not question it in a bad way, just what is this? This is a thought. It's not necessarily a truth. It's not necessarily, what has to be or what is. And so then to give a second look at what's going on, to try to look kind of around the thought, around the belief, around the expectation. What else is going on here? What's really true? Or to give a second look at the thought that arises. Is this a useful thought? Is it a helpful thought? And I think this has been invaluable for me as a parent, to have this constant kind of presence of mind, to kind of question myself and look and wonder and see. And I think that I would have made a lot more mistakes as a parent, if I had just acted on whatever thought, impulse, belief when it arose. So this ability to see things arise is one of the really fundamental features or goals of mindfulness practice. Not just to see things as they are, but to see them when they arise, when they first appear. And then the corollary of that is also notice when they pass, when a thought arises and a thought passes. Something very powerful about seeing a thought, a feeling, an emotion, a response, a suffering, see it also pass, even if it's momentarily. It's there for a little bit, it goes away for a little bit, it rises a little bit, it goes away a little bit. The inconstancy of it. This is one of the really key, I think the fundamental insight of insight meditation is to see the arising and passing of phenomena. And I think it gives a phenomenal power in our life to be able to see this, because in the gap between when something passes, ceases, and it arises again, there's freedom to be found. There's choice to be found. There's an opportunity to look at the bigger picture and try to understand better, what is this? Is this a useful thought? Is this a useful feeling? Is it an appropriate one? Is it one that now I have to kind of hold spaciously or quantumously and not get caught in the grip of it? Just allow it to be there and not be influenced by it. Or is this a thought or an emotion or feeling that this is right, I should ride this one and stay with it and use it as an important kind of way of connect to my family and my so the mindfulness practice is being a practice of really being able to be stable enough in the awareness to see when things arise. It's very, very helpful. The other thing that was a surprise for me when I started being a parent was I didn't have as many personal resources to manage myself as I thought. I had thought I could just kind of go into any situation at all and just kind of manage with my energy levels, with my wisdom, with my, I thought I was pretty resilient. I thought I had a lot of stamina, and I was amazed at how exhausting it was to be, especially a young parent. And so I was a little bit slow to come up to the idea that I had to take care of myself. And in taking care of myself, then I also learned that that I counted. And maybe this has to do with I grew up in Buddhism in a sense. I started practicing when I was 19 or 20. And I had kids when I was 44. So that was a long time, right? Kind of to grow up somehow in Buddhism. And so one of the things that I had learned to do was to let go. And that's a big feature of Buddhist practice, is letting go of attachments and clinging. And in many ways, I'd gotten pretty good at it. And then I had to learn not to do it. And around the time that I became a parent, I had to learn not to let go, because it turned out that as the kids got older, that my tendency was just to let go of my own needs, and for the sake of the children, whatever they needed, whatever. But it became clear at some point that caring for the children, take care of their needs 100%, and not take care of my needs, became lopsided, became somehow unhealthy. Actually, it was a bad role model for them if the whole world was focused on them and their well-being, and that they had to learn that they're part of a family unit, and that the greater good for the family involves what's everyone's well-being. And so I had to kind of learn not to let go of my needs or my things that were important for me or who I was, but actually help the family unit understand that we're all in it together, and it has to be compromise, give and take. It's not all, you can't just have whatever you want. You have to kind of, the kid has to learn how to adopt and take care of each other. And certainly for me, it helped a lot to learn this whole lesson when we had a second child. And then it became really clear with the second child how much the other one, the first one, had not learned how to work as a family unit. And so, I think we had a second child early enough that I think he kind of started to learn the lesson somewhat. And but that was a big thing for me as a Buddha, coming out of my Buddhism. So, and I heard my teachers, and probably I started teaching before I was a parent. Naively talk about letting go. Just let go. I'm quite embarrassed by some of the advice I gave people when I was a new teacher. It's easy, just let go. And so not only is it not easy to let go, sometimes it's not appropriate to let go. And so how do we find the balance? How do we find when the right time is? And but what I can say is that sometimes it's certainly not appropriate to let go. Some things we should keep close at hand and do. But it's always appropriate to hold what's going on with an open hand or an open heart, as opposed to a closed hand or a closed heart. And the image, symbolic representative image of a fist that holds tight versus a hand that's open is a very powerful image. And so the idea of holding, letting go, I think sometimes a more useful idea is because sometimes the idea of letting go, people think this. But sometimes the whole movement can be not dropping it, but just like this. So we're still holding it, but we hold it with an open hand. And so we're still caring for it, taking care of it, but we're not gripping it and holding it tight. And so I think that's always useful. And so that's part of the art, or part of the and it's certainly been my kind of constant exploration as a parent, is how to be a parent with an open hand or an open heart. So not to grip, not to hold tight, but also not to drop. How to hold the responsibility of being parent with some sense of ease or openness or lightness. And a big thing for me has been to try to understand how to, when not to be involved, when to step in and when to allow the child to be alone, when to allow a child to cry, and when to leave them alone in the crying, and when to, as soon as they cry, rush in and take care of it immediately. And I didn't know when I was with a young child, with a new parent, I had no idea that there were different kinds of crying. I thought crying was time to call 911. And, it's like a big deal. But I learned to listen to the cries, and they were different tones, different ways, and there was crying, because when they're really young, that's the only way they have to communicate. So they communicate a wide range of things through their crying. And so you got to listen. Oh, is that a cry? So sometimes it was, it's just, let them be. And sometimes it was, let's go take care of, help it out. But that idea, goes up through the ages. When is it when the child is challenged and having a difficulty? When it's best to leave them alone? When is it best to step in and help? And what is the in-between place where you're just there to support and try to be helpful, but maybe you don't try to do too much, but just to offer your presence. So one of I have a variety of memories of times with my kids where I think for me are very precious memories. Many of them probably they don't remember at all anymore. It's kind of a strange thing. I find it really weird that, that these things that were so moving for me, I was in tears, and touched by it, so some pivotal in my life, and the kids were maybe 2 or 3, and they don't remember whatsoever anything about it, but I'm left holding it alone. But I had one very, very, one of these precious moments was last year. And I hope he remembers. my older one. He was 17 then. And it had to do with applying for college. And it was I don't know if so I don't know if how many of you have gone through this modern applying to college experience. When I went to college in 1972, applying for it was, I think I just rolled out of bed and applied to college, and rolled out of bed and went to college. It's like, it was a very different world back then than it is now. And it's kind of very intense. It's kind of crazy. I think it's wrong, the whole thing, how it is, because it's just so much pressure. And so my son kind of, from all that I tried to do to kind of keep him from buying into all this pressure, he really was into it and trying to get into school, colleges, and doing the whole rigmarole that's required these days, or can be required. And so it kind of built through last summer. He was starting the application. I started it probably in really serious and earnest, this whole application process, a year and a half ago. And then by a year ago, it was really starting to build up through the summer, and at least psychologically. And then once the school year started, semester, then he really had to get serious about writing these college application essays. We didn't do essays when I applied to college. You just filled out a few little forms. And so it was like a whole new thing for me to understand. So he was writing these essays, and it was a big deal. And so there was one school he wanted to go to, which they have, I didn't know they had, I don't think, it's a whole world, right? It's all new to me. The idea of early admission. So you can apply early to one place, and if different ways of doing it, but I guess if you get accepted, you have to go there. And they'll accept you early, which means you don't have to send any applications to anybody else, any other colleges. So you save a lot of time and money. So but he really wanted to go to this college. This was like, he lived for it. So the week before it was due, November 1st, he was just working on his essays and everything he had to do, and schoolwork was put aside, and he just somehow, it was pretty tense at home as he was working at this. And it was due Sunday night, the applications. So Saturday morning I said, "Are you sure you have the deadline right? You sure it's Sunday? You should have the time right." "Yes, I'm sure." And so anyway, I went on the website to double check. And sure enough, midnight, Sunday night. That's what it said. So he was working all day Sunday, and this was like a big deal. Many, many months of stress and effort and going into this. And then Sunday at 9:25 in the evening, he pushes the apply button. It's all the applications done, apply. He gets a message back saying, "You're too late. The deadline just passed." 12 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. Because it was a California school. So he was just devastated. And so we tried to talk about it and what's going on and what to do. And so I think about 11 o'clock at night, it really kind of hit him. And then we had this very precious father-son time. I mean, it sounds heartbreaking, but maybe it was like very, and maybe it's the last time I'll get a chance to do this with him. He was sobbing on the sofa, on the couch. And so I went and sat with him and put my arms around him, and really tender, kind of like we were when he was a little, toddler or something. And I thought, oh, this is a chance, this is an opportunity, really. I mean, I was heartbroken too for him, but for this kind of close father-son time and really being together. And so I talked him through it and breathed with his suffering and got him to he was hyperventilating, not just sobbing, so getting him to calm down and to settle and to be there with him and say the things that were supportive and how to be with his experience. And then I said, "Let's go for a walk." So I think at midnight or something, or after midnight, we went for a walk in the dark down our street. And so we were talking and putting it all in context and trying to understand it. And then at some point it was one of those, it was the first little rains. We hadn't rained for a long time, right, in California. So that night it started raining on us, walking through the streets. And by the time we came home, around 1:30 or so, 1 o'clock at night, we were laughing. And so that was nice. And so then 1:30 we came home, and I said, okay, let's go to bed. And then he said, no, now I have to start my homework. What? Because he'd put it off, right? Because he was doing his college applications. So I don't know what time he went to bed. I went to bed. And so then I called the college the next morning and to talk to the missions people, what happened. And there was a message on the voice message. It says, we know there was a problem with the application now because the organization that processes all the applications, they're on the East Coast. But on their California website, it said midnight. We know there was a problem. We've extended the deadline 1 day. So then he applied. So, but I tell you the story because of what was important about the whole event. I mean, it's kind of heartbreaking. It was painful for me as a parent, painful for him for sure, harder for him than for me. But I saw it as a really precious time for us to bond and connect. And there was so much care and tenderness and love that in that exchange and going for a walk in the rain and being together, that, I hope that this is a memory that he keeps for his life. I think I'll keep it for my lifetime, to have those moments with him and work through this and come to the other side and hold each other and tender and loving and warm, and for him to hopefully feel a parental care and love in this kind of moments of crisis. Maybe I'd like to believe that maybe it was a very important formative experience, that if the application had gone through just the way he wanted to go through, maybe it would have been worse for him, because he kind of had bought into this societal pressure to get into school and to college, how important it was, and early admission, and it just, it probably would have just reinforced that. But because it didn't go through, and his expectations and dreams and everything momentarily were kind of shattered, there was a chance for a very different time and period with us, for us and him to feel something different. And so we never quite know. And so when do we step forward? When do we leave them alone? And so I told the story partly because in sitting on the couch with him sobbing, I was still negotiating this balance. How much do I step forward here and try to fix it or help him? How much do I just accompany him in his difficulty? I felt like I needed to accompany him, be his companion through his challenge. But how much do I try to, what do I do here? And so to find that just the right balance was the art of it, art of parenting at that time. And I think at that particular one, I think I found the right balance, because of, by the end of it, but it took about 2 hours, the whole process, I think. We were laughing together, and we had spent all this time kind of holding each other, and it was very tender. So this art of of parenting and practice, it seems like it's always, as far as I can tell, at least for me, always trying to figure out how to do it. It's always a practice, and it's one that I kind of welcome. Sometimes I'm ready for it to be over, and sometimes I wish it's never over, because I don't see it any different than doing my Buddhist practice, being mindful. I never want that to be over. It's just part of life. It's like breathing. It's like breathing to be a parent. So I hope that some of these ideas, some of these thoughts that I offer has some meaning for you. And if nothing else, it'd be lovely if it inspired you to to keep bringing your mindfulness to everything involved in parenting, 360-degree mindfulness. So mindfulness of yourself, mindfulness of your children, of your extended family, just mindfulness of our society, and be able to kind of 360 degrees pay attention to the whole thing. And in the middle of all that, keep coming back to your heart. And if you can have an open heart that can hold it all, you don't have to drop anything, but you can hold it. And then in that holding, I think you'll find your wisdom and your success with probably everything you do. You don't have to let go of anything, but you can hold it openly, and then you'll know what to do. So thank you.